Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's already 10:30, so yeah, good evening. I would like to apologize for not being able to record earlier. I had so much on my plate, and this is the only time I am free and no disturbance. So sorry for recording so late. Anyway, we'll try to finish. Yeah, we'll try to review the basic concepts of the topics that will come out of the mock test on Monday, April 4. And for those who are asking, we are still going to do a paper 4. Yeah, paper 42, not paper 6, paper 4. Okay, so we'll start with homeostasis, chapter 14 of your course book and chapter 14.4 of the 2022 syllabus. So in here, homeostasis is defined as the maintenance of a constant internal environment. Again, as you can see here, homeostasis is also described as the control of internal conditions within set limits. Therefore, this means that the internal conditions in our body, for example, the body temperature, the blood glucose, concentration, the blood pressure, the amount of water, the amount of ions in our body need to be kept within set limits. Like the normal, the normal temperature, for example, is 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, that is the set limit. This is to ensure that the body cells will function properly, that the chemical reactions happening in our cells will work accordingly. Now, when one of these conditions do not stay normal, the body will not function properly and it will cause medical problems and eventually death. Okay, that's the worst case scenario. Next, explain the concept of control by negative feedback. So negative feedback is a mechanism of the body wherein if the internal conditions change and it deviates from the ideal or the normal set point, it would always go back to that set point. Okay, so basically if something rises, it needs to go back to the set point. If something falls down, it needs to go back to the set point again. That's basically how negative feedback occurs. All right, so an example that we can set here is the blood glucose concentration, right? If the blood glucose concentration increases, then the pancreas will secrete insulin, the hormone insulin, and then the blood glucose level will go down. Okay, if the blood glucose level is too low, the pancreas will secrete glucagon because this will stimulate the liver to convert the extra glucose to glycogen and store the glycogen in the liver. So this is an example of control by negative feedback. So a question about homeostasis is this one. Explain how negative feedback is involved in the control of the body temperature. So we kind of discussed it already. Okay, so here, okay, these are the answers. So if there is a change in temperature, it could be hot or cold because it did not, it wasn't mentioned, right? If it's the temperature becomes colder or hotter. So if there is a change in temperature in general, okay, the temperatures in the skin will be stimulated. Yeah, they will know, okay, that there is a change in the temperature. And then the impulse, okay, from the receptors in the skin, yeah, the impulse, the message, electrical impulse will travel through the sensory neuron, okay, sensory neuron to the brain, okay, and of course, in the central nervous system, there is the relay neuron or the intermediate neuron or interneuron, okay, that's the other names of the relay neuron. So the relay neuron will relay the message that it has gotten from the brain to the motor neuron, and the motor neuron will relay the message through, or will transport the message to the effectors. Okay, the effectors can be the arteriole or the erector muscle, or it could just be the muscle. Okay, there's also a question here about controlling the blood glucose level by the liver. This is an example of homeostasis. So explain how the liver lowers blood glucose concentration when it's too high. Okay, so let's look at the answers. Letter D. Okay, no, not that one. Liver. Okay. So the liver will respond to the insulin from pancreas. So the pancreas will be stimulated by the hypothalamus. Pancreas will then secrete insulin if there's a high blood glucose level. And then insulin will stimulate the liver to convert the extra glucose and store them as glycogen. Okay. And then, yeah, the stored glycogen will be used for respiration. Okay, in case it's needed by the body. Okay, so this is also an example of negative feedback. Again, there is always a set limit. Okay, if the glucose level concentration rises, it should go back to the limit. Okay, it should go back to the limit, and that is the function of the insulin secreted by the pancreas. The liver then again, when it's stimulated by the pancreas, by the insulin, okay, the liver will convert, okay, the extra glucose into glycogen as, you know, stored glucose in the body of animals and in humans. Okay. If it's too low, the pancreas will secrete glucagon, okay, and then the glucagon will stimulate the liver to convert glycogen back into glucose, so that there will be glucose, enough glucose in the blood. Okay, name one other factor in the human body that's also controlled by homeostasis. Water regulation, amount of ions, okay, yeah, temperature, body temperature, water, or this one. Okay, pH in the body, the ions, concentration of urea, concentration of carbon dioxide in the body. That's also part of homeostasis. Okay, next, identify on a diagram of the skin, the hairs, hair erector muscles, sweat glands, receptors, sensory neurons, blood vessels, and fatty tissue. So we have here from Save My Exams, okay, a structure of the skin. Okay, so if you can memorize all the structures of the skin, that would be very helpful for you guys. So hairs, erector muscles, sweat glands, receptors, sensory neurons, blood vessels, and fatty tissue. So you have here the hair erector muscle, this one, and you have the capillaries, the sweat gland, and the sweat pore, the arterioles, the muscles. Okay, muscles, these are the muscles here underneath the skin. And then fatty tissue, the fat, sensory neuron is here, and this is the nerve ending. And then this is the upper layer of the skin, epidermis. The next layer to the epidermis is the dermis. Okay, all right. What else? Describe the maintenance of a constant internal body temperature in humans in terms of insulation, sweating, shivering, and the role of the brain. Okay, it's limited to the blood temperature receptors and coordination. And also vasodilation and vasoconstriction of arterioles. Okay, so you have to take note of these things. Okay, let's go to regulating temperature, the basics of regulating temperature. So regulation is always controlled by the brain. Yeah, the brain contains receptors, okay, sensitive to the temperature of the blood. Okay, the skin also has temperature receptors. and then it sends the nerve impulses to the brain via the sensory neurons. So the brain responds to this information by sending nerve impulses to effectors in the skin, for example, to maintain the constant temperature of the body, which is 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, so this is regulating the temperature of the body. Okay, so again, when the brain detects that that body temperature is too cold, then the temperature receptors in the skin would send nerve impulses to the sensory neurons. Sensory neurons would relay it to the brain. Okay, the brain will respond to this information, sending nerve impulses to the effectors. Okay, so the fatty tissue under the dermis acts as a layer of insulation to prevent too much body heat being lost through the skin. All right, so we have here an example of a negative feedback. Okay, normal body temperature 37 degrees Celsius, normal body temperature 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, so there is no change in here. This is the set limit. So when there is an increase in body temperature, thermoreceptors, or the thermo means temperature, yeah, heat. So receptors for temperature or heat in the hypothalamus, this is in your brain, and skin detect the change that there was an increase in body temperature. All right, so this is the detection of the stimulus, and this will stimulate increased sweating, vasodilation, and also hair lies flat against the skin. Okay, and these are the mechanisms, yeah, for the body to decrease its temperature. So when the body decreases temperature, again, it goes back to the set limits. Now, when the body temperature decreases, okay, so there is already a decrease in body temperature. It's too cold, for example. The thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus and skin detect the change, and it causes vasoconstriction, shivering, and also the skin hair cells erect, or we call that as goosebumps. Okay, that will help all these three, yeah, vasoconstriction, shivering, erection of the hairs, okay, or goosebumps, okay, that will help the body temperature to increase. So again, this is an example of negative feedback. Let's go to another question here. We have question number 2, figure 3.1 is a diagram of human skin in cold weather. By the way, I need you guys to also study the structures of the skin, yeah? Parts of the skin, identifying the parts, the functions as well, and the homeostasis, of course. All right, so we have here a diagram of the human skin in cold weather, and we have a table to complete. So we have to write the name of the part and use letters P to V, the letters here in the diagram, to identify these parts of the skin. Okay, so stands upright to trap air. That's basically the hair. Yeah, this one, the R. Okay, the goosebumps, for example. And then constricts to reduce blood flow to skin. So reducing blood flow, that's the arterioles. So that is S. And the other one is stops producing sweat. That is sweat gland. Okay, the sweat gland has the power to produce or not to produce sweat. So sweat gland is the letter U. So that's again what's RSU. So the hair, the artery or arteriole, and the sweat glands. Right, let's check our answers. Okay, here. So you can just write blood vessel anyway, blood vessel, arteriole or a small artery, and the sweat gland. Okay, all right, let's continue. Okay, so this is chapter 8 of your course book. Okay, translocation. Okay, translocation is defined as the movement of sucrose and amino acids in phloem from the regions of production, the source, to regions of storage, or to regions where they are used in respiration or growth, and that is the sink. You can simply say translocation is the movement of sucrose and amino acids in phloem from from source to sink. Okay, or you can complete it using these terms, these keywords, from the regions of production, the source, to the regions of storage, which is the sink, or the regions where they are used for respiration and growth. Okay, so remember that the main products, the main products of photosynthesis is glucose. Okay, it's sugar, it's glucose. However, the form of sugar or the form of carbohydrate that will be transported to all parts of the plant is not glucose, because glucose is very reactive and it can easily dissolve in water. So the form of carbohydrate that is transported in plants is sucrose. Okay, so the sucrose and amino acids are transported around the plant, okay, in the phloem tubes. Okay, and these phloem tubes are made up of living cells. Okay, the xylem is made up of dead cells, right? Phloem cells are made up of living cells, and they are joined end to end. They have sieve tubes. If you remember, they have like holes. Okay, it's hollow, but then there are sieve tubes and there are holes. That is for the flow of substances, easier flow of substances, especially glucose, from one cell to another. Unlike in phloem, it's just hollow, right? It's empty. It's like a straw, drinking straw. It's empty, so that water will reach, the leaf. Now, the transport in phloem goes in two-way direction. Unlike in xylem is always going up, right? One-way direction. That is always the direction of the movement of water from the ground, from the roots where it is absorbed, towards the leaves or towards the other parts of the plant. But the transport in phloem, the transport of food, the transport of sucrose and amino acids in plants is in a two-way direction. So remember this one. Some parts of a plant may act as a source and a sink at different times during the life of a plant. So depending on the stage of development of a plant or the time of a year. Okay, so for example, during winter, many plants do not have leaves, so therefore there is no photosynthesis. So they cannot they cannot make food through photosynthesis. However, they already have stored food in, for example, in the roots. So the phloem tubes may transport the dissolved sucrose and amino acids from the storage organs, which is the fruit or the root, or wherever the glucose is stored as starch, to the other parts of the plant. So respiration and growth of plants can continue. Okay, so there is no stopping here of respiration. Plants respire all the time, and when they respire, they need energy, so they need glucose. Okay, and when the plant is growing, for example, during spring, okay, the plant there is growing back, right? So the storage organs or the regions of storage, the roots, would be the main source of the sucrose and amino acids. And the growing areas of the plant, for example, the shoot, will be the sink. Okay. Now, after the plant grows, the plant has leaves already. They have leaves during summer, especially. The leaves can photosynthesize already, right? Therefore, the regions of production, okay, would be the leaves, okay, and then they become the source of glucose. They become the source of sucrose and amino acids. Let's go to sexual reproduction, okay, because there are a lot of questions about this. Sexual reproduction. Okay, so The sexual organs, yeah, for plants is the flower, of course. So I want you guys to study, okay? Please study the parts of an insect pollinated flower, okay? So study the parts, for example, the female part, the stigma, style, the ovary, the male part, the anther, the filament, and including the ovule also in female, also the functions of each part or each structure of the plant. Okay, so we have here an example question from a past paper. Figure 1.1 shows a flowering shoot of tiger lily, Lineum tigrinum. Okay, so this is the flower. Question, state the name of the genus of the tiger lily. The genus is Lilium. Okay, the genus is the first name of the binomial name. And name the parts labeled A to D. Okay, so A is stigma. Okay, this is the stigma. B is anther. This is where pollen grains are produced. And then C is petal, obviously. Letter D is style. Okay, so this is the stigma, the style, the ovary is located down below. Okay, and then the tiger lily plant is a monocot, monocotyledon. There's two features visible in the figure 1.1 that show it is a monocot. Okay, so if you look at the figure, the most distinct feature is the pattern of the vein. Yeah, it's parallel. Okay, so that you could say it's a monocot. Another thing is the number of petals. So the petals on top, the first three petals on top, these are the petals. There are three of them. The lower ones, okay, lower petals are actually considered the sepals, and there are three of them. So multiples of three. Okay, so therefore it is indeed a monocot. Okay, next question we have here is the tiger lily reproduces asexually. Plants reproduce sexually and asexually. Complete table 1.1 to show the advantages and disadvantages of sexual and asexual reproduction to a flowering plant species. So we are talking here about sexual and asexual advantages and disadvantages, right? This is again faster than sexual reproduction. It's also more energy efficient. Okay. Disadvantages is limited genetic variation because it only the variation only comes from genetic mutation. Okay, because same parent, right? Only one type of parent. So limited genetic variation. And in that case, there is not much variation. So the population, the offspring is limited, or it's vulnerable, yeah, to the changing conditions of the environment. So they may only be suited to one habitat and they cannot survive any other type of habitat. And of course, since there is no genetic variation, yeah, disease is likely to affect the whole population of the flowering plants. Okay, so when one is affected, the others would probably be affected as well. That's one of the disadvantages. For sexual reproduction, okay, so sexual reproduction advantage, okay, advantage for sexual reproduction is that the offspring is genetically different from one another, okay, and aside from that, the genetic variation, of course, increases, right, because they belong to two different parents or one parent but different gametes, okay, and because of the increase in genetic variation, the species can adapt to new environment. They due to variation, due to the variation. So they have a more survival advantage compared to the asexual reproduction offspring. And then when it comes to diseases, disease is less likely to affect the whole population, again, due to genetic variation. Disadvantage, takes time for plant. Yeah, it takes more energy for the plant to find a mate. For example, in pollination, yeah, in pollination, it takes time, and it's also difficult for isolated plants to reproduce. Okay, because they might need, you know, they if they are isolated in an area, so it would take pollination, a lot of pollination to happen, and cross pollination may not be possible because again they are isolated in an area. Remember all these: sepals, petals, stamens, filaments, antheriscarpal style, stigma, ovary, ovules. Okay, and also do not forget that in fertilization there is always a fusion of the pollen nucleus with the nucleus in the ovule. So how will this happen? So when a flower is pollinated, when a pollen lands on the stigma, from the anther to the stigma of a flower, so there is a pollen tube, this one that will grow. So the pollen tube is a tube, of course, from the stigma leading to the ovule. Okay, this is so that the male gamete of the pollen grain can reach the ovule where the female gametes are located. Okay, because there should be fertilization, right? So basically same like in human reproduction, the male cell or male gamete should meet with the female gamete. Okay, so basically, all right, next, let's go to reproduction in humans, but we will focus on the pregnancy. We discussed it before already. Okay, so just remember the functions of the umbilical cord, the amniotic sac, the amniotic fluid. Okay, remember their differences. Okay, and also their functions. And also remember that in early development, the zygote forms an embryo. Okay, the zygote is the fertilized cell. It will form into an embryo in early development stage of fertilization. Okay, the embryo is a ball of cells that implants into the wall of the uterus. Okay, so we have here questions, past paper questions about reproduction in humans. Question number 1, hormones are secreted by glands or artificially made artificially by drug companies. Name the gland that secretes testosterone. Obviously, it's testis. State why testosterone can improve sporting performance. This one is only 1 mark, so you don't have to write a very long answer here. Okay, so example, this one is 1 mark. Yeah, increases muscle mass, or it increases strength or power. Okay, or also increases bone density or bone mass, increases competitive drive, increases aggression, or improve recovery of muscle damage, or it promotes protein synthesis. Okay. Okay, describe what happens at ovulation. This is maturation of egg cell, yeah. And then name the cell produced at fertilization by the fission of 2 gametes. This is zygote, the fertilized egg. Okay, zygote. If an embryo implants in the uterus, the embryo secretes a hormone called HCG that stimulates the reproductive organs of the woman to continue to secrete progesterone. By the way, this hormone, guys, HCG, this is actually the hormone that will be seen or will be detected. That's the term, will be detected in the urine of the pregnant female. Okay, let's continue. Let's go to some questions here. Question number 3, okay, about pregnancy. Okay, so we will focus on pregnancy. Please study pregnancy as well. So the growth and development of an embryo begins immediately after fertilization. Okay, so the embryo, the growth, yeah, and development of an embryo. Embryo is the ball of cells, right, that will be implanted in the uterine lining, okay, or the wall of the uterus. All right. Figure 5.1. This is the figure, shows some of the events as to why between fertilization and birth. Put the events into the correct sequence to have been done for you. So Y is the first one. Fertilized ovum divides into two cells by mitosis. And then you have also here the X, development of sex organs. So you have to put into the correct sequence. Okay, so next to Y, here, obviously, next to Y, you have embryo forms into a ball of 8 cells. That's W. And then after that, V, implantation of the embryo in the lining of the uterus. Okay, after the implantation, so we're done with Y. Wait, I'm confused. So Y is done. Embryo forms ball of 8 cells, implantation. Oh, okay. Next would be letter T. So this is wait, Y and W, V, and then letter T. Okay, X is development of sex organs. Okay, all right. So you have development of the heart. Okay, and then hormones are released by the mother to start contractions. This is during the birth. So that should be the last one. Okay, let's check whether it's correct. WBTSU. Oops, sorry. Figure 5.2 shows a developing fetus and a part of the reproductive system of the mother. So you have to label. Okay, this one. You have to label, complete the table. Okay, you have to label. So what is, okay, the P is already, done for you guys. Okay, so what is M? What is N, O, P, Q, and R? Okay, so wait, P is the amniotic sac. Okay, this is the amniotic sac. And then you have the, what's given here, amniotic fluid. Okay, so this is the fluid here, the N, that's given. And then you have the placenta. Placenta is the R. And then attaches placenta to the fetus. So obviously that's Q, which is the umbilical cord. And then contracts to push the baby through the birth canal. So this is the cervix right here, the O. And what did we miss? Oh, sorry. Widens during labor to allow the head of the baby to pass. That's the cervix. Yeah, that's the cervix. This one, the O. Okay, so amniotic sac encloses the amniotic fluid. Umbilical cord attaches the placenta to the fetus. Amniotic fluid for protection. Okay, maintains temperature, allows fetus to move. Uterus wall. Oh, we haven't. We did not include this. Okay, the uterus wall. Okay, the wall of the uterus. Okay, this one I forgot. Okay, the uterus wall. Okay, this is the uterus wall. Letter M. Contracts to push the baby through the birth canal. And placenta R, okay, that's for immune protection, exchange of nutrients or waste or gases, secretes hormone, maintaining the lining of the uterus, separates blood of the mother and the fetus. So these are some of the functions, yeah, of the placenta. And then O is the cervix, or you can also call it vagina canal or birth canal. You can call it You can call it cervix or the birth canal. Vagina is accepted. Okay, A, it's accepted. Okay, but it's called cervix. Yeah, it widens during labor to allow the head of the baby to pass. Right, so again, in the early development, okay, the zygote forms an embryo, and this embryo is a ball of cells that will implant itself into the uterus. Okay, and umbilical cord, the functions of umbilical cord, placenta, amniotic sac, amniotic fluid, and also, again, yeah, for the sexual reproduction in humans, please focus on pregnancy, okay, and the development of the child, including the functions of the umbilical cord, placenta, amniotic sac, amniotic fluid, and function of the placenta and umbilical cord, okay, especially in the exchange of dissolved nutrients, gases, excretory products, and providing a barrier to toxins and pathogens. Okay, so remember that as well. And also take note, yeah, that toxins such as nicotine, pathogens, viruses can pass across the placenta, so it can affect the fetus. That's why it's very important for the mother not to smoke, not to drink alcohol, okay, because again, the toxins can pass across the placenta to the fetus. And then also, if you can memorize this, yeah, the labor involved, the process involved in labor and birth. Okay, and advantages and disadvantages of breastfeeding as well, and comparison of breastfeeding to bottle feeding using formula milk. Okay, now let's proceed to coordination. Okay, what I want you guys to focus on is the, wait, coordination is chapter 13, if I'm not mistaken. Chapter 13. Ah, 14 in here. Okay, nervous control in humans. Okay, but I would like you to focus on the different types, yeah, different types of neurons. Another topic I want you guys to study, to focus on studying, is coordination and response, especially this part here, the synapse and all these, okay? So the structure of a synapse, remember that the synapse is a junction between two neurons, remember that. And then also study or review how an impulse triggers the release of a neurotransmitter, okay, or how the neurotransmitter diffuses across to the next neuron. Okay, they bind with the receptor molecules in the receiving neuron, and then they cause the impulse to continue to the receiving neuron and to the next neuron. Okay, and then how drugs, like say for example heroin, act upon synapses. So they kind of mimic, right? They mimic the real neurotransmitters, or they also cause the production of other hormones, okay, like the happy hormones, for example. The nervous system coordinates the responses of animals to changes in the environment. Write the names of the missing parts. The nervous system, this is central nervous system because you have the brain and the spinal cord. This is peripheral since you have the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves in here. Then the flow chart, figure 2.2, stimulus to pain receptors, receptors to X should be sensory neurons, since it is relay, motor neuron, and then muscle, and then response. So the X here is sensory neuron. Okay, state the structure found at X. Yeah, so that's the sensory neuron. State the type of involuntary action shown by the flow chart. So this is a reflex, right? This is a reflex action. 3, state 2 ways in which a voluntary action differs from an involuntary action. Okay, so an involuntary action is a fast action, right? A reflex. So therefore, this is slower than involuntary action. It involves the brain as well. It involves thinking, and it's not automatic. Okay, the voluntary action is not automatic at all.